is here. Let's reveal the truth. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Wenda Guan. Sitting next to me is Davy, an expert who has worked in the fields of AI and cloud computing for many years. Hi, Davy. Please say hello to our audience.
Hi, everyone. I'm Davy. I've held important leadership positions at major tech companies in both China and the US, and for a long time I focused on cloud computing and AI. I'm really glad to have this opportunity today to talk with you all about the future trends in AI development, as well as the differences between AI in China and the US.
So, as I know, in China we have things like MiniMax and Kimi, and when it comes to the US, a lot of people mention OpenAI. But if we get specific, what are the biggest differences between them?
Overall, there are a few important gaps between them. First, as we mentioned earlier, Chinese AI models like DeepSeek and MiniMax are trained on much more Chinese data, along with a lot of Southeast Asian language data. Because of that, they have a natural advantage in understanding how Chinese and other regional languages are actually used in real life. They better understand how people express ideas and how they naturally respond. In contrast, American models still have a stronger advantage when it comes to English. So if you listen carefully, you can really hear the difference. When you ask OpenAI a question in Chinese, it often doesn't process that question in exactly the same way a Chinese native model would. Instead, it may rely more heavily on its English-centered system to interpret the question, generate an answer, and then respond in Chinese. That's the first major difference. Second, as we all know, there is also a clear gap in training efficiency and cost. Now, these large models in the US are based on massive amounts of English language data. And here's a little side note. Some of you may have heard of a company called Scale AI. Well, a few months ago, it was acquired by Meta. But from my perspective, Scale AI itself didn't have a lot of technical depth. The most valuable thing it did was to annotate massive amounts of English language data so that machines could learn from this data and be trained on it. By training on this data. So, conversely, when it comes to Chinese large language models, the focus, building on American algorithms, is more on efficiency, on how to optimize training costs. How can we train using cleaner, distilled data? So, this is another major difference that leads to a different outcome. Chinese AI is more focused on the Chinese language, and the costs are relatively lower as well. As for American AI, it's the most proficient and powerful in English, but the costs are higher.
You just mentioned Meta, and I know they also acquired another company called Manus. Manus is also a very popular AI company. Could you tell us in detail why this company is so hot right now?
No problem. Actually, I was one of the first users of Manus. When Manus first launched, they sent me an invitation code and invited me to try out their first generation product. My initial impression was that it would be easy to replicate because its underlying technology is based on our large language models. So they didn't do any R&D at the large model level, but instead used the large model as their underlying architecture. You can think of it as the large model being the foundation that supports everything they build on top of it. What they mainly did was actually build some workflows on top of that foundation. They break down some complex tasks into step-by-step processes, and then use this workflow to call the appropriate large model at each step, leveraging the capabilities of the large model so that something complicated can be accomplished easily. For example, as office workers, what we do most often is analyze data, make PowerPoint presentations, and generate reports. If you use Manus to handle these tasks, your efficiency will increase dramatically, and the quality will also improve significantly. Hum. Back then, I thought its potential for replacement was really high because it wasn't very technically advanced. At the time, it was basically what people call a shell product. But recently, after I heard that Manus was acquired by Meta and tried it again, I found that it has really become much more powerful. Yeah, so a lot of people are wondering about this. Why would Meta spend so much money to buy a Chinese company that's basically just a shell? Right, and that brings up another topic we want to discuss, the differences between Chinese and American AI. American AI, especially the large models, focus more on the model's own advancement, accuracy, and power. In contrast, China is better at practical implementation. As for Meta, this company has clearly lost out in the competition of large models. With the resignation of their chief AI scientist and the failure of their Llama 3 and Llama 4 models, they've already lost their competitive edge in the large model field. So, how can they stay ahead in the AI arena? They've chosen to focus on applications instead. And when it comes to applications, Chinese companies are still the best, so they chose a leading AI application company, Manus. Even though Manus doesn't have its own large model, the scaffolding or workflow they've built on top of large models is currently the most powerful and user-friendly on the market. Everyone I know who has used Manus has told me it's really worth it.
So it seems that American AI keeps pushing the ceiling higher and higher, while Chinese AI keeps finding ways to lower costs and make things practical.
Right.
We just talked a lot about how developers and businesses use AI and these models, but for the general public, what's the most obvious difference between Chinese and American AI?
For the average person, what we can directly feel right now is that American AI, especially the large models from the US, are like all knowing experts. You can ask them about anything, and you can even have them generate images or videos. But Chinese AI is more like a collection of industry specialists. For example, we have AI for healthcare, which has been released recently, and we also have AI for manufacturing. There's also AI for e-commerce customer service. So you'll notice that in China, AI is divided up by industry, whereas in the US, AI is this all-powerful, super intelligent entity.
Do you think China and the US are competitors when it comes to AI?
My understanding is that AI is extremely significant for the progress of all humanity. In the development of AI, China and the US actually play complementary and collaborative roles. Like we just mentioned in the US. Everyone in the US is focused on making AI more powerful and more accurate. In China, on the other hand, the emphasis is on bringing AI closer to people, making it so that AI can truly help people solve real, practical problems.
Yes, I completely agree with what you just said. Actually, when it comes to AI, China and the US have more of a complementary relationship. For both businesses and the general public, I think the most important thing is to find the AI that suits you best.
That's right.
Yeah.